Peace be with you. Welcome to the Institute of All Intelligent Life. Today is Thursday, the 24th of November, Thanksgiving Day, 2016. And I'm Alan Kiesler. We are going to have a very interesting class today, different than usual. I'm just going to begin with some deep breathing and prayers, and then be open to some new information which I've not planned. But as I was preparing this class, I kept feeling that something is going to happen special and I should not plan exactly what I'm going to say. So I myself don't know what this class is going to be about today. This sometimes happens. So let us see what happens. We will begin with some deep breathing. You're welcome to join me as you like. If you're not familiar with what we do, we inhale deeply to the count of about 8. I indicate the count on my fingers here. And I also repeat the name of God as I do that, silently while inhaling and then aloud while exhaling to the count of 16. So you're welcome to join me if you like. You can close your eyes if you like. It's often helpful to focus. All right, we will begin. Allah, 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 Allah. Again, we'll do this 2 or 3 more times. Allah, 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 Allah. Allah, 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 Allah. Allah, 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 Allah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala ala Muhammadin kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ala Ibrahim innaka Hamidun Majid. Allahumma barik ala Muhammadin wa ala ala Muhammadin kama barakta ala Ibrahim wa ala ala Ibrahim innaka Hamidun Majid. So we have been discussing the last 2 days about time and timelines, and this very important understanding, which I am repeating, that we need to get free from this idea that we have all been trained in, indoctrinated in, you could say, by our educational system. Certainly, if we studied science, this is very prominent, but it's just our common sense experience, I think, at least in our cultures throughout the world, pretty commonly. Maybe some Aboriginal cultures and some native cultures in some places, they don't have this idea of time as a stream moving in one direction, but time more as a field, and it's possible to go into the past and into the future. Um, but we have accepted generally this, what has been called a collective hypnosis, this idea of time passing. And once something has gone into the past, it's irretrievable and we can't go back to it, and all those things in the future are beyond our understanding or beyond our ability to know. So that idea which we have in our cultures is not there in some other cultures. In fact, just recently, my good wife and I watched this movie, The Arrival, which just came out this month, which is about extraterrestrials, about some race of beings. Heptapods, they're called, because they have 7 legs. But the very interesting thing about this movie and about those extraterrestrials is that the concept of time that we have is not present in those extraterrestrials' consciousness. They are aware that everything exists in a sort of circular way or in a simultaneous way, and their language, as is depicted in the movie, is circular and simultaneous, you might say. And one of the points of the movie is that by learning that language, the heroine of the movie started thinking also in a non-linear time frame. And we can call them time loops, or moving out of time into the future and into the past. And I won't give away some of the secrets of the end of the movie, but that idea was very prominent in the movie, that time is not what we think of it as just one linear movement, but we can actually go into the future, go into the past. So I think this is actually quite important for us to realize at this time, as we are entering into a higher density. That is, our whole planet is transforming from 3rd density existence into 4th density existence. And in 4th density awareness, people live in what we might call an extrasensory world, where things are seen beyond the senses. These senses limit us a great deal. That is, our seeing, smelling, tasting, hearing, and feeling. These 5 senses we're generally limited to in 3rd density life, whereas in 4th density life, other senses are like what we call telepathy, or telekinesis, or teleportation. All these abilities to understand something, to acquire some knowledge from a distance that is not available immediately to our senses, or to move something without touching it, just be able to move it by the power of the mind, or to move oneself, to transport oneself from where we are to a distant place in just a moment. These sorts of experiences and these sorts of sensory actions are going to become more and more common. And perhaps you have already started experiencing some of these things more, especially telepathy, or as somebody just asked yesterday, déjà vu. Somebody asked a question, what is déjà vu? Déjà vu is that it has something to do with going outside of time in some way or the other, where we see something and we suddenly wait, I saw that before, I've been here before, that feeling. So these sorts of experiences are increasing, and for us to become not disturbed by them, for us to become familiar with them, is important. It's good for us to realize that these things are not something strange. They may be unusual for us, but they are common in 4th density existence. So, where are we going to go from here? Well, I had earlier, in fact, when I started teaching this course, my plan was to go into some detail into the history of our cosmos and the structure of the cosmos. And I did earlier in the course talk quite a bit about the structure of the cosmos, especially the very general overall structure of there being this, what I was calling dimensional existence, an existence of many dimensions, and then the extra-dimensional existence. The main difference being that that extra-dimensional existence is eternal, whereas this existence is temporary. So that was the basic structure of the cosmos that I had described. And in terms of history, I didn't talk very much. I talked, I guess, a little bit about the very beginning of the cosmos in terms of history. And I talked a little bit about how our sense of time actually is our sense of time. It's exactly that. It's not something universal or absolute. But time comes into existence when creatures start thinking in that way, which only happens after beings become more conscious. That is, the lower level of first density existence doesn't have an awareness of time. In second density, and especially in third density, but also in second density, there is some awareness of time. So, I can talk a little bit about the history of our planet. I think maybe I'll mention a couple of things, but I think before we get into that, it's important to remember this point that I've made in the last couple of days more than once, of timelines, that there are different timelines. And I think this is the real reason why I was guided not to go into history very much, because I started realizing much more than I had before, although I had some awareness of different timelines. It wasn't so clear to me as it became just after beginning teaching this course that history is much, much more complicated than we usually think, because there are many different timelines. And which timeline are you describing when you discuss history? So I'm just going to talk about a couple of the very fundamental differences in recent history, I might say. Recent means the last tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of years, not going back into the distant past of many millions of years ago, hundreds of millions of years ago, or even a couple of billion years ago, because our planet, according to both modern scientific study and extraterrestrial sources of information, our planet is a few billion years old, and there have been conscious living entities on our planet for a couple of billion years. That is, as I described earlier, what is called the ancient builder race, a very highly advanced, both technologically advanced and spiritually advanced race was living on our planet a couple of billion years ago, as I understand, at least on this timeline. So we're not going to talk about that ancient past and that ancient builder race which did travel throughout the galaxy and built these incredible artifacts which still exist after a couple of billion years. So obviously they're building materials which were made out of an alloy of aluminum, which is sometimes clear, sometimes translucent, sometimes black, but somehow they developed different ways of using this aluminum alloy, which is extremely durable, which literally has lasted for 1 billion or 2 billion years. So for some reason, that ancient builder race left. Whether they totally left the galaxy and they totally left the dimensional existence and moved into trans-dimensional existence, I don't know exactly what happened to them. But we do have the artifacts, and the secret space program explorers discovered these artifacts, not only on our moon and planets in our solar system, but in other nearby star systems also. And they, for example, I had mentioned earlier in this course, the moons of Saturn, which look very, very much like the Death Star weapon described in Star Wars. There are two moons of Saturn, Mimas and Tethys, which have that, round crater on them, which looks just like the Death Star weapon in Star Wars, and the heat signature of those moons of Saturn also reveals that they are not just a typical ball, a typical sphere, but that there are structures underneath the surface of those moons which clearly indicate something going on under the surface. That is a massive structure, different parts of which are producing more heat than others. So those two moons were actually built by this ancient builder race. So that was a long time ago. We're not going to go back into that ancient history, but just I want to talk a little bit about Lemuria and Atlantis, because these are two civilizations which existed on our planet. The Lemuria, or Mu, was located in the Pacific Ocean area, whereas Atlantis, as the name indicates, was existent in the Atlantic Ocean area. And both of them submerged. Now, how that happened exactly, there are different timelines, different histories of how that exactly happened. But we know that both of those, there's plenty of good, solid, scientific evidence that there were great civilizations under both the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans, because the remnants of those civilizations are visible under the water, as I've mentioned earlier, off the coast of Japan, as well as on different coasts in the Atlantic, both the American side and the European side. There are large buildings underneath, structures built which indicate huge cities. So we know, not from any mystical or esoteric or extraterrestrial sources, but from our own archaeological expeditions underwater, that these civilizations did exist. There were ancient civilizations which built vast cities underneath the waters of the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, which of course that time they were above water. So what happened, and what lessons might we learn from those civilizations? Well, according to most accounts, most timelines, the Lemurian civilization was a very peaceful civilization. It was agrarian for a long period of its time, and then it gradually developed cities and became technologically more advanced. According to one timeline, the Lemurian civilization went under the water because of a natural catastrophe. Earthquakes or volcanoes, or just shifting of the tectonic plates, and the entire continent went under the water. Hawaii, the Hawaiian Islands, are said to be one of the few remaining pieces of Lemuria that are above the waters of the Pacific Ocean now. Perhaps Easter Island and some of the other islands in the Pacific also were mountain peaks, or areas at least of that Lemurian continent which did not get submerged. According to another timeline, the Atlantean civilization began while the Lemurian civilization was still in existence, and there was a war between the two, and Lemuria was destroyed as a result of that war. I puzzled over this for a long time. Why are these two so different descriptions of the end of Lemuria present in the literature? And I finally concluded that I should not worry about it, which one is true, because maybe both of them are true. Maybe on different timelines, Lemuria was or was not destroyed in a war with Atlantis. So, but we know that Lemuria did exist, and exactly what happened to it we don't know. Or maybe, although this seems a little bewildering to us if we think in third density terms, if we think in terms of a linear history, then there can only be one thing that happened. But if we think in terms of multiple timelines, that it's possible that actually there were different historical developments of Lemuria's final days in the different timelines. Okay. Then Atlantis, certainly Atlantis was a later development. Lemuria was earlier and Atlantis was later. And we're talking, now about tens of thousands of years ago at least. Lemuria may have begun hundreds of thousands of years ago. I don't know the exact dates, or we can say, according to different timelines, there were different dates of its beginning. But in the tens of thousands of years ago, Lemuria submerged under the Pacific Ocean and Atlantis became prominent. Atlantis we know more about. There are more sources of information about Atlantis. But what it seems clear from all the different timelines that I've studied at least, that Atlantis developed a highly technological civilization. They used crystals especially. Crystals, of course, we also know because we use crystals and diodes. Crystals have a sort of memory, you can say. We know from our computer technology also that crystals can be used. They have a sort of memory. So crystals have the ability to be transformed in such a way that they can be used to recall past events. That is, what happened can be locked into the memory of the crystal. So crystals also have many other properties, different types of crystals. And the Atlanteans became aware of these crystalline properties, which can be used for healing, and they can also be used, as the Atlanteans did, unfortunately, for making weapons. And they considered themselves very powerful because of their powerful weapons using crystals, and they eventually were destroyed also. Quite certainly the Atlantean destruction had to do with war. And just as a few of the Lemurians had left before the destruction of their continent, and some of them went to Asia, some went to South America, in the same way, there were a few Atlanteans who knew what was coming and they left in advance. Some went to South America again, some went to Tibet, and some went to Egypt, and some went to Turkey. And we know, again, this is not from esoteric means, but from historical study, of Plato especially. It's quite famous that Plato wrote about Atlantis, and that the Egyptians were in some ways descended. The great Egyptian civilization that we consider ancient, although in this time frame it was pretty recent, only a few thousand years ago. The Egyptians had the records of the Atlantean civilization, and Plato, the great Greek philosopher and historian, he's not usually considered a historian so much as a philosopher, because our modern civilization, our modern academia rejected Plato's account of Atlantis. And I think the main reason for that rejection is that the Cabal and the extraterrestrials who are involved with the Cabal in keeping us in ignorance, they knew that if we found out about Atlantis, that it would be much harder for them to control us. So they tried to keep it in the realm of mythology. But actually, Plato did not describe Atlantis as a mythological place. He described it in historical terms. And he wrote about Atlantis as a historical place, which the Egyptians had known about. So, let's see what time it is. Maybe I can end it now, because, as I said, actually it's true, I had no idea I would be talking about Atlantis and Lemuria, or what I was going to be talking about today, but I just had felt I should allow myself to be guided as I spoke, rather than planning it and writing notes in advance, which is not what you're supposed to do as an academic professor. But I'm trying to move into fourth dimensional type of thinking, which we just should allow the spirit to guide us, as we say, or we allow the intuition or the extrasensory input to come and not plan out everything rationally, as third density existence of human beings in a more advanced state is very rational, and everything is controlled and planned out. Like scientists do controlled experiments. They have to be able to control the variables in the experiment in order to be able to come out with a successful test of their hypothesis. But that sort of controlled experimentation is very limited because there are many things we can't control. So anything that cannot be controlled by human beings cannot be subjected to such an experiment, and therefore is outside the realm of modern Western science. So we should be open. We need to become open to uncontrollable circumstances, and we need to flow with them rather than fight against them and try to control them. This is really the disease of the modern Western civilization, is the idea that we can control everything, that we are the controllers. If we can control things, it's not the way the scientists are doing it. Nature is much more powerful than we are. So we need to work together with nature instead of trying to conquer nature, trying to control nature. And the Atlanteans made that mistake of trying to control, conquer. And as we shift into the fourth density, our mentality needs to change, and from one of being conquerors and controllers to ones of being partners with the flow of nature. And it's actually very peaceful. And when we adopt that faithful, trusting mood, that we trust in God, or we trust in the universe, or we trust in that what is happening is good, and it's actually for our benefit if we will just work together with it instead of fighting against it. All right, let's go to the questions. We have Majid Anif from Saudi Arabia. Assalamu alaikum. Wa alaikum salam, Majid Sahib. And more salams. I'm not going to go into all of those. Okay. Gemma Art, as usual, has a good comment. I saw the video. You shared the link yesterday. Corey Goode looks so familiar, like some actor we know from quite some time, but his speech was a bit not comfortable or smooth, so that one can understand all what he was answering, satisfy the listener easily. Okay, very good comment, thank you. So Corey Goode looks so familiar, like some actor we know from quite some time. I would suggest that we all know Corey Goode, not from having known him in our immediate environment or our immediate surroundings or our immediate time frame, but maybe in dreams, or maybe in some other timeline, maybe in some other dimension. But I feel like I know Corey Goode very well. I've never met him. I've just seen some of his writings and some of his videos. But he looks very familiar to me too, and I believe that that's because we do actually have some contact in some other sense, that maybe sometime in the past in some other dimension we were friends or something, I don't know. But yes, this is happening to me also more and more frequently, and it happens to my wife all the time, that we're just walking along the road, or we're in some market and we're talking to the cashier, and the person says, "I know you. Where do I know you from?" And they feel, so that sort of outside of time connection, or in dream connection, or whatever we want to describe it as, there are more and more people who are experiencing this sort of thing more and more, and this will become more and more common until it won't be unusual. If we see somebody who we've definitely never seen before in this timeline, in this world, but we know that we've seen them before. We feel like we're old friends. So that is happening again and again. All right, so I feel that way about Corey Goode also. And I'm not sure which video you're talking about. His speech was a bit not comfortable or smooth. I can say that in his earlier videos, See, he has been making these videos now for a year and a half or so, I think, or I can't remember exactly how long, but for a year more or less. And in the beginning, he had suffered, I can't remember exactly what the accident was, but he was in a lot of pain, and he was taking pain medications. And in the beginning, when he was making those videos, his speech was not very clear or smooth because he was sedated. He was taking a lot of strong pain medications. So I don't know if that's what you're talking about when his speech wasn't very comfortable or smooth. I noticed that difference also. If you see his earlier videos done a year or a year and a half ago and you see the ones he's doing now, that definitely is a difference that other people have noticed also. Anyway, I hope that you will continue watching his videos, because I consider him to be one of the most important sources of information, certainly about the secret space programs. All right. Saima Aziz Mirza again. Was Lemuria, Lemuria actually, Lemuria, as usual spelling, Lemuria. Was Lemuria connected to south of India in any way, or was it a place which connected African South and the south of India? That is another old continent called Gondwanaland, I think. It was definitely, there was also land in that area of the Indian Ocean which has been submerged. Lemuria was in the Pacific Ocean, not in the Indian Ocean. But there, hundreds of thousands of years ago or more, the continents as we know them were not visible on the Earth. There were different, in fact, maybe they were all connected at one point. So it does appear that just like the African continent on the western coast and the South American continent on the eastern coast were connected. They were geologically, they're very similar. So it appears that they were one and then they broke apart as the tectonic plates shifted and the Atlantic Ocean exists now, but the two sides of those two continents look like they were together at one point a long time ago. So similarly, the South African, South Indian, and the African, geologically they were perhaps connected and similar. So that was not Lemuria, however. Lemuria was in the Pacific. Okay, Saima Aziz Mirza again. Nikola Tesla said that crystals are living beings from a different world. Wow, I didn't know that. I'd never heard that before, but crystals definitely there's something very, very special and powerful about crystals. I didn't know that Tesla had said they're living beings from a different world. But there are many things that are living that we don't consider living. So crystals, I can accept that very easily. And sometimes stones and mountains also are actually living, conscious beings, which is in our third density modern scientific way of thinking about life and consciousness. That doesn't make any sense. How can a mountain be a living, conscious being? But it can be. And so crystals are usually considered just a rock or a stone, but they obviously are very special. Their molecular composition is also special. But I didn't know this, but that's very interesting, that crystals are living beings from a different world. All right, let's see, what else do we have? Oh, Gemma Art again. Always good comments. Thank you very much for good questions. Can we say that wrongdoers are beings of a different timeline from the empaths, noble, gentle, compassionate human beings? This is a very good question. I think that that's possible. It's possible that of course we know there are different timelines, and perhaps on some timelines there are many more evildoers and selfish individuals, and on other timelines there are many more good and compassionate beings, and they sometimes overlap, you might say. The timelines overlap, and then the gentle, good people, the noble people, are forced to live in the same place, the same planet, the same timeline as those wrongdoers, and then it creates an interesting situation which we can all learn from. So maybe that's possible. I have never heard that before. Again, we're getting a lot of good ideas here, which I've never considered before. But certainly there are different timelines, and different timelines have different qualities. And sometimes it makes sense to me that some timelines could have developed in such a way that people are very kind and gentle, empathic, very sensitive, extra sensory, telepathic, whereas on other timelines they develop in such a way that people are increasingly negatively oriented. And of course, those timelines then may meet and overlap, and then those different types of people come in contact with each other, which would lead to interesting situations and perhaps opportunities for growth and learning for both those groups. So I like that idea very much. Thank you, Gemma RDG. All right, let's see. Wow, Saima Aziz Mirza again. Thank you for all your very good comments and your beautiful poem that I posted yesterday also. Also, they claim the Noah's Ark arrived on Mount Ararat in Turkey. I saw a documentary on this ark. I guess Noah perhaps came from Atlantis. Another famous theory about Atlantis is that it was destroyed between 11,600 to 12,400, and science has found a phenomenon called Younger Dryas, highlighting it. Please see Younger Dryas as well. It was a period in which the temperatures rose exponentially high and then dipped and then went high within a period of a few hundred years. I found it a very interesting read. Yes, I have heard this about Noah's Ark being in Turkey also, from different sources. Of course, that's the usual biblical interpretation. It's quite common among Christian and, I guess, Jewish scholars that Noah's Ark arrived on Mount Ararat in Turkey. Also from the Sumerian literature, Babylonian literature, that would seem to be the place where Noah's Ark arrived. So maybe Noah came from Atlantis. I don't know. I've never heard that before, but I believe that he was not from the Atlantis area. I think he was from the what we now call Iraq, but I may be wrong. Anyway, another theory, famous theory about Atlantis is it was destroyed between 11,600 to 2,400. I don't know if you mean years ago or BC, but yes, it was around that time frame that I've heard from other sources also, was when Atlantis was destroyed. And I think those who have studied Plato's writings about Atlantis have come to a similar conclusion, that that was about the time frame of the end of Atlantis. And this is very interesting. There's so much I've never heard of. I've never heard of this Younger Dryas, in which within a few hundred years the temperatures rose very, very high, then went very down low, and then went high again. I will do a search on that, Younger Dryas, and thank you very much for that information. Sounds interesting to me too. Shakil Ahmed says, happens to me all the time. I think you must be talking about what I was saying about deja vu, or seeing somebody and thinking, I know them, I've seen them before. Yes, it happens to many people. More and more it's happening also. Gemma Art, you are right. I never heard about him before, and that was the first time I saw him, but I just stuck there looking at him for quite some time. I think you're talking about Corey Goode. Yes. I also agree completely. This is very, very, I think Corey Goode is a very influential person, and many of us may have had contact with him before. Personally, I believe he's a sixth density being, like the wanderers who are known as the Ra group, or the Ra social memory network. So maybe we're sixth density wanderers also and know him from that realm or that dimension. But I feel like I've known him for a long time too. even though, like you said, the first time you saw him, you just stood there looking at him. Wait, I know him. Ijaz Itsham is. I have been watching Dr. Stevens' videos and looking forward for his new movie, Stephen Greer. You must be talking about. Yes, I've been asked about Stephen Greer before, and I've spoken about him before. I've met him, and I met him quite a long time ago now. I think it was, when was it? Anyway, it was at least 10 or 20 years ago. 10, no, it was, I can get the exact date. I think it was in the year 1999 or 98 or 2000, within those, because about that time, so it's been almost 20 years ago, 17, 18 years ago, I met him. We had a good talk. I liked him a lot. I found him a very friendly and honest person. Even at that time, I was a little confused because he spoke about all extraterrestrials as being good. And somehow he's gotten fixed in that position and he's defending that position, although it's quite clear that that position is wrong. I don't know why he's taken that position, but he says that all of the so-called alien abductions that are harmful to people or that seem to be evil, those are secret military programs and military abductions and not extraterrestrials, because for some reason or the other he has this idea that all extraterrestrials must be good, better than we are. He's wrong. But he's a very good man. I've always felt he's very sincere. He may, as some people have recently suggested, because he has criticized Corey Goode actually, he may have been manipulated by the secret space programs or by the intelligence agencies to have some wrong ideas, because there is a program, actually. I'm glad this question has come up because I have about 5 minutes till our usual scheduled time to end. I'd like to talk about this, that we're talking about the very recent past now. There is an effort is being made by the cabal to disclose the extraterrestrial presence, but in such a way that the cabal's many crimes against humanity, war crimes, all sorts of horrible crimes that the cabal has been doing, that they will be covered up, they will be concealed. So that's called partial or limited disclosure. They're trying to reveal some things about the fact that we have been out into space without the whole picture coming out. And on the other hand, people like Corey Goode and David Wilcock, whose conversation I referred to yesterday, they are pushing for full disclosure, as I am myself. Full disclosure means we need to become aware, really, of what has happened, that the cabal, they so-called themselves the Illuminati, who do have extraterrestrial allies who are very evil and selfish and manipulative and deceitful. So they are working together to try to continue deceiving humanity, but gradually revealing some sort of space programs, secret space programs. So this is a difficult topic because a lot of good people, like Stephen Greer, seem to be involved more in the limited disclosure. And even Andy Basiago seems to be more promoting a sort of limited disclosure. So this is a fight that's going on right now. What sort of disclosure is going to happen? Is it going to be this limited, partial disclosure of the extraterrestrial presence, or is it going to be full disclosure? And definitely there's going to be disclosure, and it's coming very, very near. Not even 5 or 10 years. I think it's going to be before that. Perhaps even within the next year or two, we're going to see open mass media acknowledgement of the presence of space programs and the fact that we have traveled to Mars and beyond, the fact that we have spaceships that are far beyond the rockets that NASA has been using. So that's going to come out very, very soon. But is it going to be the limited partial disclosure that the cabal is pushing for? Just like I mentioned, John Podesta and Hillary Clinton were also talking during her campaign about extraterrestrial disclosure. And John Podesta especially was pushing for it, but that was that limited type of disclosure. So this has been in the news a lot recently, and more NASA has also been revealing things like there's water on Mars, there's water on other moons in our solar system. They're talking about many, many planets that have been discovered, a few light years away. I mean, more than a few, but 10 or 50 or 100 or a few hundred light years away, where there are planets that are very similar to Earth in terms of their size, their distance from their stars, etc. So NASA also, so more and more, the possibility of life outside of Earth is being discussed openly in the mass media by NASA scientists. And they've said we're going to discover extraterrestrial life very soon. They haven't admitted that we've already discovered it and they've been visiting us, but it's increasingly coming out in the mass media even. So there's going to be disclosure very soon. So as far as Stephen Greer goes, he seems to be participating in some way or the other in a program which is promoting limited disclosure, whereas Corey Goode is promoting full disclosure, and therefore Stephen Greer has said some things criticizing Corey Goode. So to me it's very, very clear. Stephen Greer, who I've known for many years and appreciated, he's done an awful lot of very good work. The Disclosure Project is one of the most influential ways that people have become convinced about the extraterrestrial presence, and I strongly recommend seeing his press conferences, especially his citizen hearings, disclosureproject.org. So, and he's made some good movies. Sirius, Sirius, was a movie he made which did a lot of disclosure, and he's making more. So, but we want full disclosure, which Stephen Greer doesn't seem to be promoting, at least certainly not so enthusiastically as people like Corey Goode. All right, let's see if there are any more important comments. I think not, because our time is up. So we can end now. Ijaz Itisham has said unacknowledged. I think you're talking about unacknowledged special access projects, USAPs. There are many, many secret space program activities, black budget they're called, that are unacknowledged. That means nobody admits they're really happening. And if somebody is asked about it, even by government officials, even the president or the Congress asks one of these persons involved in one of these unacknowledged special access projects, they are supposed to say, and they do say, it doesn't exist, I know nothing about it. Even they can lie to their own government and their own president. That's the way these unacknowledged special access projects. Special access means only on a need-to-know basis can somebody be told about them. And if they're not on that special access list of people who have the need to know, then the people involved in those projects, actually they take a vow. They take a vow that they will do this. They will lie about the existence of this project that they're involved in. It's a horrible system, but that's going on. Okay, this was a very interesting class. I think you'll agree. Totally unscripted, unplanned. I had no notes. I had no idea what I was going to be talking about. But maybe I'm going to be doing this more, because this seems to be, it seemed to me to work today. A lot of good information came out, and I hope we had a lot of very good, excellent comments and questions. So thank you very much, especially to Gemma Art and to Saima Aziz Mirza. Thank you very much for your careful study of these topics and sharing them with us. And we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. And there's both the, in Pakistani time, 6:30 a.m. Meditation and prayer time, and then of course this class, which is, did I say, maybe I made a mistake there. It was 6:30 a.m. in Pakistan, and this class at 7:30 p.m. Pakistan time. Okay, may God protect us all. Thank you all very much.